Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Stewart, Reverend Thwaites, Mr. Dwayne Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Wright, Mr. Daly, Mr. Henry, Mr. Henry,
Statements by ministers.
Mr. Speaker, we today will have the contribution by the opposition spokesman on finance. No, I'm advising him what is going to be done. That's usually where we do it. No, man. No, man. So that is what we will be doing today, Mr. Speaker. That's the only item on the agenda today.
Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today is a revised medium-term profile to the fiscal policy paper for the year 2019-2020.
Bills brought from the Senate. Petitions. Papers. Reports from committees. Notices of motions given orally. Mr. Williams.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Information and Communications Technology Authority Act 2019.
Questions and answers to questions. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
So, Mr. Speaker, I invite you to invite the opposition spokesman on finance to make his contribution to the appropriations bill.
Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make my second budget presentation in the capacity as Shadow Minister of Finance and Planning. Last Thursday, we heard from the Minister of Finance on matters pertaining to the budget and the economy, and I enjoyed your presentation, Minister. It has obviously had some mixed reviews, and you will hear today the views of the opposition spokesman and, of course, the opposition on that budget. But before I get into my presentation, I wish to publicly thank my beautiful wife, Sandra. Her solid support has enabled me to face and overcome many challenges over the 35 years that we've been together. Babes, this year I will once again quote the Manhattans. There is no me without you. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to pay tribute to my parents, who I will always honor. My late father, Professor Sir John Golding, who as Jamaica's first orthopedic surgeon spent his life in medical service to the less fortunate of our country. He was a builder of many important institutions to empower the disabled. I also wish to pay tribute to my mother, Lady Patricia Golding, who has led a life of public service herself and is always dignified, kind, and strong. God bless you, Mummy. Mr. Speaker, I also want to acknowledge my 3 children, all adults now, who have been supportive of all that I do, and 2 of them are here this afternoon, which represents a historical moment for our family. And of course, Mr. Speaker, I wish to salute my energetic and dedicated constituency executive and the wonderful people of South St. Andrew. You gave me your trust and elected me as your Member of Parliament in October 2017. It is a tremendous honor and privilege to represent you. You have blessed me with your love and support, and it is a profound pleasure to serve you in return. And Mr. Speaker, I must of course thank our party president and leader of the opposition, Dr. Peter Phillips, for appointing me to shadow the portfolio of finance and planning. It is an honor to sit beside you in this house, sir. I continue to benefit from your experience and wisdom, your deep understanding of Jamaica's political history, your strategic intelligence, your unwavering commitment to national development, and of course, your personal friendship and support. Mr. Speaker, we can all agree that for all Jamaicans to live a better life, whether you call it progress or you call it prosperity, we must have stronger growth in our national economy. The last PNP administration set targets for growth for the years 2013-14 through to 2019-20 as part of our 2013 economic reform program. At the time, those were considered modest and achievable growth targets. However, over the past 3 fiscal years, 16-17 through to 18-19, and in the government's projections for the coming fiscal year, 2019-20, there has been significant slippage in those relatively modest growth targets. Since this government assumed office, Jamaica has fallen behind by over 5% over this 4-year period relative to the levels of real GDP growth that we had committed in 2013 to achieving. In fact, from 2016 to 17 through to 2019-20, over 4 years, we had projected a cumulative growth of 10.1% for the Jamaican economy. In fact, what has happened is we've only, in those 5 years, achieved 5.5% growth, including, for that purpose, the coming year and the projection in the budget for this coming fiscal year, 2019-20. If the growth targets of the PNP's 2013 program were being achieved by this government, our teachers, our nurses, our police, and other public servants could have been paid a real increase for the current 4-year wage cycle, rather than standing still against projected inflation. Were those growth targets being met, we would have been able to spend more on capital expenditure to fix our decaying hospitals, our farm roads, our crumbling water systems, and so on. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, under the 2013 Economic Reform Program, we were projecting central government capital expenditure for this coming fiscal year, 2019-20, of $128.9 billion. That was for central government. However, because growth has not been where we had projected it, the government is budgeting to spend only $72 billion. In 2016, when this current JLP government came to power, you set and promised new targets for growth higher than those that had been set by the PNP in 2013. There was a lot of hype around that. However, the truth is that you have failed miserably in meeting your own targets. In fact, as I've stated, you're now way behind the growth targets in the 2013 PNP economic program and what we were committed to achieving. And the question is, why is this so? If those targets were being met, much more could be done to improve the lives of all our people. Why are our citizens being shortchanged by sluggish growth? And what choices is this government making that are causing our people to be worse off as a result of sluggish growth? My presentation today, Mr. Speaker, will seek to answer those fundamental questions. Mr. Speaker, in 2016, the government's Economic Growth Council, which was announced with great fanfare, projected a number of initiatives designed, as they put it, to achieve the 5 in 4 target. The 5 in 4 target being real GDP growth of 5% per annum to be achieved by the end of the 4 years. By the end of the 4 years. The current Minister of Finance was the Vice Chairman of the Economic Growth Council at the time.
Order, please. I wish the Speaker
The government warmly embraced this plan, expressed confidence in it, and entered into a declaration of intent to implement the plan. As reported by the Jamaica Information Service, the GIS, the Prime Minister said the following at the time of signing the declaration of intent back in 2016, and I quote, "This government will make sure that we are faithful to the sacrifice that the people have made. We deserve results. We are a great country. We will make Jamaica the place of choice, the center of the Caribbean region for culture and lifestyle, trade and commerce, logistics, technology, and information." But Mr. Speaker, what has actually happened since this declaration of intent? The reality has been very disappointing. In 2016-17, 1.4% real GDP growth. In 2017-18, 0.9% GDP growth. For the current fiscal year just ending, 2018-19, the projection is 1.8% fiscal GDP, real GDP growth. And that indeed is significantly lower. The 1.8 projected for this year, ending this month, is significantly lower than the 2.7 that the fiscal policy paper of April 2016 had projected, because it was projecting then that we'd have been achieving 2.7% by now. Minister of Finance said in the House last Thursday, and has been saying for a while now, that Jamaica has enjoyed 15 consecutive quarters of positive growth. However, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, this interpretation of the official data seems questionable, because when you look at the government's own statistical agency, Statin's website, they have a table showing that for at least 2 quarters during that period, that is the 4th quarter of 2017 and the 1st quarter of 2018, Jamaica actually enjoyed negative growth of 0.8% and 0.4% respectively. So I think you need to check that, Minister, and clarify why that is so, because it's on Statin's website. And in fact, in my printed text, you will see the table set out there, and it's in the top line. Mr. Speaker, the government's fiscal policy paper, tabled on the 14th of February this year, states that the government is projecting growth of 1.5% for the coming fiscal year, 2019-20. And that is year 4 of the 5 in 4. 1.5% growth for next year is lower than the 1.8 outturn for this year, and it represents, of course, less than a third of the 5 in 4. So, Mr. Speaker, this government has been consistently underperforming against its own growth projections. 5 in 4 were once buzzwords, but now they have curdled like stale milk, only good to throw away. And this is more than disappointment. In the context of the 5 in 4 target, 1.5 in 4 can only be described as failure of performance, for which the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, headed by the Prime Minister, must take full responsibility. Mr. Speaker, let the record show that the last time Jamaica achieved average real GDP growth of over 2% over a 4-year period was actually from 2003 through 2006 under the People's National Party government of that time, with an average real GDP growth over those 4 years of 2.2%. Those 4 years were followed by the JLP government, which took office in halfway through 2007. And the 4 years that followed under their government saw a negative average GDP growth of minus 1.1% for that 4-year period. After the PNP was voted back into power in 2011, we turned that negative around. We restored the public finances to a path of sustainability by successfully navigating a very challenging economic program. The public debt, which by 2012 had risen to an unsustainable level of over 146% of GDP, using the IMF's numbers, was resolutely turned around and placed on a sustained downward path. This was strengthened, Mr. Speaker, by the legislation of fiscal rules in the Fiscal Responsibility Framework of 2013. And by 2016, Jamaica's debt had been reduced to 122.3% of GDP. And in fact, if the new definition of public debt that was introduced in April 2017 were applied, that number, which would have been down at 113% of GDP at the end of our administration. So, Mr. Speaker, while successfully leading Jamaica through the difficult but absolutely necessary challenge of bringing the public debt under control after we assumed office in 2012, we also at the same time achieved positive average growth over the next 4 years. And Minister, when you speak of 15 consecutive quarters of positive growth, it would be nice of you to mention that several of these quarters occurred under the stewardship of the PNP. Of course, several. Of course, the real credit for these achievements must lie with the resilient Jamaican people. Mr. Speaker, as a result of the immense sacrifice of our people, the public debt is now below 100% of GDP. And it is expected, if we maintain the fiscal discipline to which we are committed, to keep falling steadily to the statutory fiscal rules target of 60% of GDP by March 2026. This reduction of debt, Mr. Speaker, has created greater fiscal space. And what does this mean? Fiscal space means available resources in the government to pay for things other than servicing debt. But sadly, the expected growth remains elusive. Given the sustained austerity measures adopted over several years under successive IMF programs and the continued improvement in the state of the public finances, the number one question must be, why can't Jamaica break through to much higher levels of growth, without which there can really be no prosperity for our people? Mr. Speaker, in the fiscal year 2015-16, the government of Jamaica collected $411.6 $411.85 billion in taxes, $411.85 billion. The current projections for fiscal year 2019-20, which is the year we're embarking on April 1, show the government of Jamaica collecting $565.88 billion in taxes for the period. Mr. Speaker, this is an increase in collected taxes of $154 billion since this government came to office. The fiscal policy paper recognizes that the major factor in this frankly amazing increase has been far more efficient tax collection as a result of the various reforms to the tax system that we pioneered. The reforms implemented under the last PNP administration are the bedrock of the financial health that Jamaica is enjoying today. Those reforms include third-party information laws, transfer pricing rules, various enforcement and collection provisions, creating Tax Administration Jamaica as a semi-autonomous revenue agency with its own advisory board, establishing Jamaica Customs Agency as an executive agency, implementing the RISE tax management software at TAJ, and implementing the ASICUDA system at Customs. Mr. Speaker, these reforms have delivered beyond expectations and created the fiscal space that this government has inherited from the heavy lifting of the past PNP administration. In short, Mr. Speaker, there is much more money available now because of the work that we did. Mr. Speaker, the cumulative percentage increase in taxes since 2015-16, when we demitted office and the new JLP government came into office, the cumulative increase in taxes is 44.3%. This far outstrips the annual percentage increase in inflation over that period, which is only 19% over the 4 years. So taxes have gone up by 44%, whereas inflation has been 19% over the 4 years. It also exceeds by far, the cumulative increase in GDP, nominal GDP, over that period, which is 32%. So tax intake has exceeded even the nominal growth over the period. Mr. Speaker, all this tax money didn't come from growth, as there has been precious little real GDP growth. Mr. Speaker, the government is reaping the fruits of the efforts and good work of those who came before them. This is a matter of record. This is a matter of record, and credit should be given where it is due. Mr. Speaker, in real terms, the taxes paid by the Jamaican people have increased very substantially under this JLP government. The increases in taxes far outstrip any increases of economic activity. However, the overwhelming success of the tax reforms, so crucial to the rate of debt reduction achieved over the past 6 years, are also having other economic effects. The burden of increased taxation is reducing disposable income. It is compressing consumer spending, and it is compressing aggregate demand. It is therefore now part of the reason for the weak growth Jamaica is experiencing, as I believe the minister himself recognized in this House last Thursday. So yes, there has been no new taxes in the past 2 years, but you are collecting a whole heap more from the old taxes. And the question is, how has the government used these additional resources from the tax system? Mr. Speaker, last year we called for taxes to be given back to the people out of this tremendous windfall provided by the improved collections. Yet, even after the tax giveaway announced by the minister last Thursday, the government is once again looking to collect more taxes in the coming fiscal year, 2019-20. You are projecting an increase of 47 billion in taxes, or 9.2%, over the original budget that was tabled for the 2018-19 fiscal year ending now. 47 billion more in taxes is going to be collected, according to the budget that you tabled, than was originally budgeted for this fiscal year. No new taxes, but GCT collections are projected to go up by 12.6% this coming fiscal year, from 177 billion to 199.3 billion. No new taxes, but income tax collections are projected to go up by 14.5% this coming fiscal year, from 138.2 billion to 158.3 billion. We must ask why the government hasn't shown some regard for the people and the burdens that they are bearing in determining how to direct the tax rollback. Why not, for example, lower the GCT rate, even slightly, to achieve a situation where taxes keep up with inflation but don't exceed inflation? Consider Miss Maureen, Mr. Speaker. Miss Maureen is a single mother. She's employed as a clerical officer. She has 3 children going to high school. After paying her rent, she has to pay all these indirect taxes whenever she shops for food or takes a taxi. She is struggling to make it on the same salary as the government takes in more and more indirect taxes from the system. Mr. Speaker, will the reduction in transfer tax and stamp duty, will the abolition of minimum business tax or asset tax on companies make Miss Maureen's life any better next month or the month after that? Their answer is no. Taxpayers like Miss Maureen deserve better. Mr. Speaker, we estimate that $16 billion of additional taxes could be given up without reducing government revenue in real terms. The government could reduce the GCT rate from the 16.5% where it is, to return that $16 billion to ordinary Jamaican consumers and still see its revenue keep pace with inflation. The people, Mr. Speaker, would have greatly appreciated such an ease-up in the GCT. Or the government could have reduced the $14 billion of SCT, the tax put on gas, to pay for the 1.5. And they could have given the traveling public an ease up from the high fuel prices. I'm talking about the taxi man and his passengers, the bike man doing deliveries, the truck man bringing in food from the country, the pensioners who have to buy gas out of their fixed incomes. All of them deserve a break from the heavy taxes. And Mr. Speaker, let us not forget that part of this, the taxes that are on gas, was to finance a hedging insurance arrangement to protect Jamaicans from the increases in world market prices of oil. Mr. Speaker, that hedging insurance arrangement was abandoned by this government, but you have kept the tax in place that was put there to pay for it. That's not fair to the people. That's not fair to the people, Minister. Because of your decision to retain that tax, gas costs more at the pump now than it did under the PNP when the world market price of oil was higher than it is now. In 2013, when the world market price for oil was $100 a barrel, Jamaican motorists were paying $112 Jamaican per litre for gas. Now that the world market price for oil is $60 per barrel, motorists are paying over $140 a litre per gas. Oil price gone down, but gas price in Jamaica gone up. And it's the taxes that have done that, Mr. Speaker. Again, Mr. Speaker, That's not fair to the people. Mr. Speaker, this indirect taxation, excessive indirect taxation, is having a negative effect on the lives of ordinary Jamaicans. The price of gas affects everyone, whether you own a motor vehicle or not. Many ordinary Jamaicans have to travel from afar to reach their workplace. Consider Miss Paulette, a domestic helper working in Kingston 8, living in above rocks. By the time she forks out the monies being spent on traveling, Miss Paulette and her family are left to survive from hand to mouth. The last PNP government started the process of lowering tax rates, even as it continued to deliver